This week on the Men at the Movies podcast, we get into the ring with Creed. We talk about our struggle with the question of being worthy. We see identity bestowed with love and affirmation. And as in all Rocky movies, we discover that our biggest fight is the one with the man inside of us. Join us as we discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being. Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald. And joining me on the couch, in the room, breathing the same air, is my son, Brendan McDonald. Hey, buddy.
Hello.
So when I first started the podcast about a year ago, we're getting close to the year. We're actually starting to plan what we're going to do for our anniversary episode. We're going to try to get Ricky and Patrick and Britt and me all together in the same room to talk about some great movie. So if you guys have an idea, a suggestion for a movie we should do, hit us up on Facebook or Instagram. It's Men at the Movies is the name, or you can even email us at menatthemovies.podcast@gmail.com to say, hey, you guys should do, this one. Some of the ideas right now on the short list are Shawshank Redemption, The Godfather, Good Will Hunting, Field of Dreams. Those are the short list ones. So we've got the anniversary coming up. But when we started, I talked with Brendan. He was going through his senior year of high school, COVID high school back then. Seems like forever ago, doesn't it?
Yeah, it feels like it's been a while.
And we were talking about some of his favorite movies. And he said Creed was, if not his favorite, it's up there. He also likes Draft Day and Moneyball were two of the others. And Creed, I look back at some of the stuff. Creed is probably one of the movies that birthed the idea for this podcast. Back, I don't know when we saw it originally in 2015. I took you and your brother to go see it. And doing the math last night, I realized that his brother was 9 at the time. So we saw it in 2015 when it came out, one of the opening weekends. And then 2 years later, and I know this because I have notes in my phone, we watched it again. I think it probably came out on Amazon Prime or something. And I had notes written on my phone, and it was dated 2017. And that was, 3 years before the podcast ever got started.
Right.
But this has been one of the movies that I've been excited to do. Obviously, you are excited. You love this movie. So we watched it last night. So the question we typically lead off with is, Brendan, why did we pick this movie? Why do you love this movie? Why is this one of your favorites?
I think this is a great movie just because it shows a lot of heartbreak and a lot of, I want to say, misery.
Yeah. How so? How is there heartbreak and misery? By the way, as always, we talk about spoilers. So if you haven't seen it and you don't want us to spoil the movie, go ahead and turn it off. But again, it's like a 6-year-old movie now.
Adonis goes through a lot of heartbreak and misery just from being born without a father and not having that father figure in his life. So that from the jump, he's fatherless, doesn't have that person to really look up to. In and out of juvie and grows up fighting. And even as he gets older, a lot of complications in the adult world, not trying to find the right job to have and quitting the job. And
right. That was crazy. It's like, you just got a promotion and you're quitting to fight, to box.
You're just like your father.
Yeah. And so we'll pull this clip. It's from the very beginning, like he mentioned. This is when Apollo Creed's wife, Marianne, goes in and finds Adonis. And Adonis's mother had died. His dad obviously was Apollo Creed, who died before he was born. And Adonis is the son of another woman. So Apollo had an affair, had Adonis, but had died in the ring fighting Drago, many, many years ago. So in this scenario, Marianne comes in and he doesn't know who she is. But his, as you mentioned, his fatherlessness comes out.
I'm sorry about your mother. I know what it's like to lose someone. When your father died, I was angry for so long. I hurt myself, pushed family away.
I don't have no father.
What did you say?
I said I don't have no father.
That's not true. He passed before you were born, but you had a father.
There's some of that heartbreak and misery that you were talking about.
I think about how it's the kind of start of him accepting the name, because he's like, I don't have a father. And in school, we learn about depression. Like the first phase is denial. He's not accepting the fact that that's his father.
He doesn't have the experience of a father. Right? He can look at these other kids and they have fathers. And granted, he spent a lot of time in foster care and or foster homes and group homes and all this stuff. And his father, his view of other fathers probably wasn't great either.
Yeah.
But for him, his father was just a name. Some guy that died that he didn't know. And a lot of men sort of have fathers. Obviously, we all have fathers. we gotta come from somewhere.
Yeah.
But our experience of fatherlessness is very similar, because what we expect to see isn't what we actually see. And especially with relationship to God. Like, we experience a lot of fatherlessness. Jesus came and said, when you pray, say our Father, which was very new. It wasn't how the Jews had been brought up learning about God. You don't say, you're not that comfortable and close and intimate, but Jesus came and said, when you pray, say our Father. And he constantly said Father. And there's throughout the whole New Testament, it's about being children and sons and daughters of God. But I think like Donnie, in that a lot of times that we say, yes, I believe in God, but on, Monday through Saturday, like, I don't have a father. It's up to me. Life is up to me. I got to figure out how to make it. And I got to punch somebody, because that's what he found he was a fighter.
Yep.
To prove his worth. And as we'll see, that's one of his big questions is, what am I worth? And the other one is, who am I?
Right.
If you think about that, when you look at people, the world around you, how is your worth measured? How are you worthy?
I think in today's world, it's a lot of how many likes do I get on Instagram? How many followers do I have? How many and it keeps going on. It's a popularity race today. And if you're not one of the popular kids, you're just apparently a nobody. And I think that's kind of how Donnie felt. With no father, he felt like a nobody.
Yeah. And Felicia Rashad, who plays Adonis's almost foster mom, really, because she wasn't really his stepmom, but I don't know. It's a weird relationship, but she steps in when she doesn't have to and rescues him. But when he says, I don't have a father, she's like, what did you say?
Right.
It's like, how dare you say you don't have a father? You have a father. He was an amazing man. Not a perfect man, but he was an amazing man and one of the greatest boxers in the world. And so he goes home with her to live and goes to school and lives a rich, bougie life. They live in a mansion. He goes to school, has a good job, and quits because he wants to fight. And this is one of the reasons that I really, other than the fact that we've been talking about this for like 8 or 9 months, but because Brendan is getting ready to go to college. Next week, you're driving off, filling up your car with the rest of your stuff.
Right.
And where are you going?
East Carolina.
And I know everybody listening is like, oh, he's going to party. He's going to East Carolina. Just follow the beer trucks. That'll get you there. Why did you pick East Carolina?
I like the programs that they had, and I think it's going to be a good place for me to try to find myself.
Yeah. And what are you studying?
Exercise physiology, trying to get my doctorate in physical therapy.
So not a low bar.
No, trying to high expectations around here.
And when you mentioned the programs that they had, obviously it wasn't just the academic, because there's not a lot of schools in the area that
Right.
have both.
I think there's only 5-6 schools in North Carolina that have the program.
And what do you think you want to do with that after college?
That's a tough question, but I think I'm going to try to do athletic training, try to be in the sports area of physical therapy and muscle rehabilitation.
Less like you don't really want to work in a hospital,
Nah.
but more like in a gym or at home,
Right.
like personal training, wellness sort of stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So again, big dreams, big aspirations. And who knows what happens between now and then.
Right.
What else? I mean, that wasn't the only program that you enjoyed that appealed to you from ECU.
I really like the campus. It's a really nice campus. I think seeing football games in East Carolina, if I've heard things, yes, they're a party school like this and that, but I just think the atmosphere for those games, sports events, it's going to be something to remember growing up.
Well, and you even wrestled with the idea of trying to walk on to the football or the basketball team.
Right. That was a tough decision to not, but I just didn't find it fun anymore and trying to live life and not base my life off of sports.
Right, because football in high school was pervasive enough. Football at college, walking on, you'd be every day busting your butt, doing all you could.
Right.
And as we've talked about a lot, when you say yes to something, you're saying no to everything else.
Yep.
So saying yes to football or basketball meant saying no to a lot of, like you mentioned, the life aspect of college.
Right.
I'm really excited for you because, like you mentioned, that even just going to the football games is going to be awesome. Like we were looking at the schedule, and you're coming back to Charlotte for the game against App State over Labor Day weekend, and then we're going down there for family weekend to see Charleston Southern play, and a kid from your school, actually from your high school, plays for Charleston Southern, so we're going to get to see him play and cheer against him because we want to root for East Carolina.
Roll Pirates.
Is it Roll Pirates or Go Pirates?
Roll Pirates.
Roll Pirates. Got it. Okay, I gotta get the lingo. So at some point, children have to leave. Especially young men. All children have to leave. They grow up, they develop their independence. And they have to pursue, like you mentioned, finding who you are. Because right now, who you are has been a lot of determined by hanging out by me and your mom and Stephanie and sort of dictating and determining where you're going, what you're wearing, who you're going with, all this stuff. And this is the first time that you'll be away for a while. And in the movie, Donnie does a very similar thing where he says, as I mentioned, he got a promotion. Then he quit his job because he's like, I want to fight. I want to do this full time. And that's a very difficult thing, I think, especially for mothers, when their son says, hey, I'm going to do this. And she kind of responds the way I think a lot of moms would.
You are your father's son, and you're part of him. But it doesn't mean you have to be him.
I'll call you.
Listen, you want to be in somebody's ring? You don't have to call me.
That's just a brutal, again, cutting him off at the knees, because Donnie is from a young man up into from a boy to the young man we're going to see through the movie. He's always struggled with family. Where do I belong? Who am I? Because in the movie, he's not Adonis Creed. He's Adonis Johnson or Donnie Johnson. Don Johnson, the guy from, I'm Just kidding. That's an old school reference that you don't get.
No, not at all.
Iconic 80s star from Miami Vice.
Oh, him? I don't know.
Yeah, Britt and I make jokes every once in a while. We're like, yep, we just lost all of our millennial crowd. But there comes a point where a young man has to follow his heart. Hopefully it's not against sort of breaking his mother's or his father's heart. But you have to do that. And you have to go find yourself. You have to go pursue it, or you'll always wonder, what could I have done? What could have happened? Oh, there was a scene that I forgot we wanted to talk about because it doesn't work on the clips. But right before this, we see him down in their movie room because, again, they have a mansion. So every mansion has a movie room, right? And he's playing one of the Rocky and Apollo fights, probably the second one. And after watching it for a few minutes, he gets up and sort of shadow boxes, but he's not shadow boxing as his father. He's shadow boxing as Rocky. Like he's in Rocky's position, throwing Rocky's punches at the man who gave him life. And you see that really through the movie. He's fighting the shadow of his father as he's trying to figure out who he is.
Yeah, I think that's a really good scene. With him trying to basically fight his father because Apollo made him, and as we see in the movie, later in the movie at least, Adonis is really just trying to fight himself throughout the whole movie. It's him trying to beat himself, and he sees his father a lot in himself. And so him fighting against Apollo, shadow boxing against Apollo, I think that's just a really cool moment in the movie.
There's a lot of that as men go through their initiation, because that's really what this movie is about. And we talk a lot about initiation on the podcast, about how we go from who we were. And we do, because they're not just, we have to break loose of our mothers, we have to break loose of our fathers in a lot of ways, of not being who they think we are, but finding out who we really are. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do this is because you're entering this whole phase. On your 13th birthday, we talked about the next stage of going from boy to sort of warrior, cowboy. It's another stage of initiation. And now you're going in like another level up. And for your 13th birthday, I gave you a wooden sword, for training to learn how to become the man that God called you to be. For your 18th birthday, I gave you a big old sword with a sharp edge to it, because now when you're out there, you can make decisions that impact the rest of your life. And we think about that and we say, oh my gosh, that's bad things, but there's good things too. Like you're going to make friends that you'll have for the rest of your life. Like I'm still, meeting on Zoom with my brother and our friends from college over 20 years ago. And so you're going to make friends. You're going to have experiences that will bring a smile to your face. And this is all great. And it's exciting, and it is an exciting time. Even if sometimes it might come with a little heartbreak. Like she said, if you're going to fight in a ring, don't call me.
I think that's really hard because Adonis has been basically had that feeling of betrayal his whole life. And now he's going to Philadelphia on his own, not really with a plan, just to fight. So I think that was really hard for him.
Right. And as a parent watching your children go through initiation, it is hard because there is a certain amount of suffering involved with your initiation, your preparation. And you saw it a little bit with Zach and with Lainey, your older siblings, as I dealt with what they were going through, because there's a certain sense where you have to let your kids figure it out and you can't step in and rescue them, even if you can. Yeah. Like even we talked about today, there comes a time when you're going to have to pay for your own oil changes for your car.
Not looking forward to those days.
So he goes to Philly. Donnie meets up with Rocky, and he begins training. really the core of this movie is the relationship between Adonis and Rocky Balboa. And that's what gives it so much heart and depth in my mind is because you see Donnie eagerly reaching out, as you mentioned, searching for family, searching for love, for validation, for belonging, searching for someone to bestow that on him in a meaningful way, particular to him, because he says, I'm a fighter and my mom is not accepting of that. My real mom has died. My dad has died. The woman who raised me isn't accepting who I am. I have to find who will. And he finds Rocky. And in Rocky, he finds not just a trainer, but the voice of a father figure who will speak words of life and encouragement and engage his heart.
Okay. You see this guy here staring back at you?
Yeah?
That's your toughest opponent. Every time you get into the ring, that's who you're going against. I believe that in boxing, and I do believe that in life. Okay? Call it a learning curve.
Ain't no
You got-
learning.
Hey. You know what? You can't learn anything you're talking. That's a fact of life. You know what I mean? As long as you're talking, you're not listening. One step at a time, one punch at a time, one round at a time. One step at a time, one punch at a time, one round at a time. Get it right. Good. I want you to let it all out. Hey, everyone's ever disrespected. See them. Anything you ever wanted. Go after it. Now's your time. Make a statement. Watch it. One round at a time.
There was a part in that last clip where Rocky's like, everything that has been hurting you your whole life, go after it. And that really speaks to me personally, because everything that has hurt me in my life has made me such a better person. Like, if you asked me 2 years ago how I was, I would probably not be great. And right now I'm satisfied with where I am, and I feel like at this point in the movie, Rocky saying everything that has hurt you, go after it, was kind of the changing point in the movie of Adonis becoming who Adonis really is.
Yeah, because I think 2 years ago, there's no chance you're not going to college and going after the football team.
Right.
Because that's where you would find your belonging and validation was on an athletic team, whether it's football or basketball or just being a part of a sports team.
Right. And I feel like my whole life was kind of revolving around sports. And when I was young, really young.
You're still young.
I mean, yes. But as I've gotten older, sports really haven't became that big to me, to the point where I wanted to pursue sports, but I still have a love for the sports that I play.
Right. And it's that idea of I'm doing it because I love it, not because I have to prove something.
Right.
And it's interesting because when I was listening to that clip, those exact same words came to my mind. Those words of like, everything that's ever hurt you, anything you've ever wanted, go after it. In those moments, that's what Adonis has been looking for, is Rocky sees him. He's empowering him. He's speaking life into him. As you mentioned, he's seeing Adonis for who Adonis really is. And they go, and of course, they get a fight. They win the fight. Their relationship is growing. Their relationship is more than trainer boxer. They're living in the same house. He's, going out with Bianca. They're living life together. They're becoming a family. And in a lot of ways, because it's real easy to look at it as a one way, the student gets from the teacher. But there's also moments in Rocky's situation where, like when they're coming in, he's like, nobody's been in the house since Paulie, his best friend, died. They came over and cooked. He's like, man, I haven't had food like this in years. Because Rocky wasn't just filling gaps in Adonis's life, Adonis is filling a gap that Rocky didn't even know he had. He had pretty much given up on life. He was just showing up, waiting to die because everything good was behind him.
Right. There's a picture in the movie of Rocky and his son, and I think Adonis kind of became that son figure to Rocky too, because Rocky's son moved away from Rocky with his girlfriend.
There had been a story about his son, and but his son didn't really love boxing. And so here's someone, an Adonis, and even Adonis had called him Unc, because he's sort of family. Closest thing to family that Adonis has had, he said at one point. As the movie goes along, they're faced with a decision. And in spite of this, so we've got the burgeoning relationship with Rocky and Adonis, as well as his girlfriend, Bianca. And they get offered a big fight. This guy's looking for a fight. He's looking for a guy. And it gets out that Adonis is Apollo Creed's son. And so he had been wanting to make his own name. He'd been wanting to make his own legacy. And that's another thing we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. The idea of legacy. But he hadn't wanted the Creed name because he wanted to make his own name. At least that's what he said.
Right.
But when offered this fight to go fight Ricky Conlan, the world heavyweight champion, it was contingent upon him taking the Creed name. Because he's like, fighting Donnie Johnson's nothing. Fighting Donnie Creed, now that's going to draw a crowd, especially with Rocky Balboa in the corner. So he's hesitant to make that choice. And Bianca asks him what he's afraid of.
So, what are you afraid of?
I'm afraid of taking on the name and losing. They'll call me a fraud. Fake Creed.
What you think about what's true? You love to fight, right? Yeah, it makes you happy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you are Apollo Creed's son, right?
Yes.
So then use the name. It's yours.
And I love the way that, I think her name's Tessa Thompson, Bianca's character. That voice that comes in, like, and it's the Holy Spirit. And to me, that, like, especially the way, take the name, it's yours. The way that sounds, because we get afraid. I get afraid of disappointing my children, disappointing my wife, disappointing my parents. I'm 46 and I still worry about disappointing my parents. But we're afraid of a lot of things. We hear a lot of voices. And a lot of it is, what are they going to say about me? Are they going to say I'm lazy? Are they going to say I'm taking the easy way out? Are they saying that I don't really want to do this? Or I'm not, you worry about what they say. Like you mentioned with the social media stuff. What are people going to say about me? That was his fear. What if I take the name and I lose? They'll be like, you're a false creed. You're a fake creed. But Bianca reminded him of what is true. It's like, what's true? You love fighting, don't you? Apollo Creed was your dad, wasn't he?
Right.
Like, those are undeniable truths. And I find that when I'm wallowing, sinking, drowning, spiraling down and in shame and fear, that it's really helpful to remember the truth. Then that's where the Bible comes into play and looking at, we are the sons of God. For women, we are the daughters of God. We are loved. We are provided. That idea of fatherlessness, when we feel like we have to strive and chase and work hard for everything. But then Jesus said, what man can add a day to his life through worry? Look at the lilies of the field and the birds of the air. They don't worry. They don't do anything because their father's taking care of them. And if he's taking care of them, how much more is he taking care of you? So we need to be reminded of the truth in those difficult moments. And sometimes the difficult moments are, I'm stepping into something that might be awesome. I'm facing the biggest fight of my life, which is both terrifying and exciting.
College.
Right. You said yesterday you just hit you because your roommate was like, I'm leaving in 4 days.
Yeah, 4 days. That's less than a week. And
Today we're recording on Friday the 13th, not doing a horror movie. But a week from today, a week from right now, you're going to be driving to East Carolina.
I should be in East Carolina.
You're hoping to be in East Carolina by
In
now.
Greenville, yep.
So when you think about that sort of thing, when you think about that sort of interaction, when you're thinking about going off to college, what are those fears that whisper?
My biggest fear is probably not succeeding in what I told y'all I would. Not getting my doctorate, not going to that major school, or after graduate school. Yeah, that's probably the biggest. That'll be the biggest, hardest thing.
When you're talking about the fear of not doing the things you had planned on doing, not going to get your doctorate in sports exercise, physiology.
Right.
Or it's two of those three words, right?
Exercise physiology.
Exercise physiology. What is it that you're actually afraid of?
Not living up to my parents' expectations.
Right? And that's a heavy burden, especially because you don't know what the expectations were.
Right.
Well, and that's a pretty consistent theme. I don't even think for men, but for women, for anybody. Not just your parents' expectations, but everyone's expectations, right? That's what Adonis was talking about. If I take the name and lose, they'll say I'm a fake creed, but they'll call me a fake creed because what they call me is what I'm most afraid of being. And if you called your mom and I and said, hey, I don't think I want to be a physical therapist. I don't think this is right for me. I didn't get into graduate school. Two questions, I guess. One, what would you be afraid to hear? And then the second part is, what would you hope to hear?
I would hate to hear you're a failure. Yeah, that's probably the biggest. I would hate to hear that you're a failure or me being a failure, because that just, you don't want to hear that from your parents that raised you. So kind of going back to what, who was it? His mom? Marianne said about, you don't need to call me. You're already going in the direction of your father, and you don't need to call me because I don't want to go through that heartbreak.
Right. You're dead to me, boy.
Right. But I think I'd want to hear, oh, it's okay. We will have your back every step of the way, no matter where you go.
We listened to, when we drove down to Gulf Shores, Alabama earlier this summer, we listened to Green Lights, Matthew McConaughey's
Green Light.
Matthew McConaughey's sort of audio biography, his memoir, I think is probably a better way to put it.
Yeah.
But he talks about he was going to school. He was planning on going to law school, but he loves storytelling. So he called his dad to say, hey, I think I'm going to stop doing law school because I want to go to film school. And he was terrified that his dad was going to be upset, disappointed, whatever. And he said that what his dad told him, like, floored him, and it was the best answer he could ever hear. It's like, well, if that's what you want to do, don't half-ass it.
Right.
Go 100%. And I would hope that that's how we would respond. If you said something like, hey, I don't think this is what I'm going to do, but I'm going to pursue this, or I'm going to go after this, or, because for me, the ultimate destination, occupation, whatever, it isn't, I want you to have this job or this degree, or because I've lived long enough to know that you don't necessarily need a college degree to make a living, to live life. It helps. It gives you more options, but if that's not what you want to do, if that's not where your heart's in it, I was telling my wife, even last night, I was like, I'm sorry, because I don't really want to be a nurse anymore. because I don't like how the profession has gone. You see how much the sausage is made and you don't want the sausage anymore, I guess. Something along those lines.
Right. And we talk about a lot of what makes your heart run wild. And I think as a parent, not that I am one yet, but
I hope
in the future, when I'm a parent, I comfort my children because whatever they do, I pray that it makes their heart run wild, and that is what makes them happy. And I feel like whatever makes you happy, whatever makes your heart run wild is the best thing for you. And so even if you're not making millions, like hard to make millions, but
hashtag 1%.
But I hear a lot of if you hate your job, but you get paid really well, it's not as good as you love your job, even though you're not getting paid as well.
Yeah. And that's where I am these days. Like I've stepped away from teaching in nursing school to do these podcasts and work on a book and do a lot of things that I don't get paid for, at least not in currency. There's a lot of payment in relationship equity and all that stuff. But you mentioned that idea of what makes your heart go wild, what makes your heart come alive. And it's all, for me, that was a transformative moment of several years ago from this quote by Howard Thurman. It said, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes your heart come alive. Because what the world needs is peoples whose hearts are fully alive. That's the paraphrase version of it.
Right.
Quote.
And I feel kind of like right now, or a couple months ago, whenever I got the job at Great Wolf Lodge, I was like super excited. And I've seen over the past couple months, Great Wolf has like kind of made my heart come alive because one, I've always wanted to be a lifeguard, and I feel like the interactions that I've had at Great Wolf are a lot better than they were at Outback.
Right.
So it's hard at restaurants because you're always trying to please the guests like this and that. And at a water park, you don't really have those guests that get upset because of the small things. It's like, oh, the slide is closed because, oh, let's just go ride another ride. It's not like at at Outback, there's something in my food. Sorry, we'll make you more food. So I think the interactions at Great Wolf had just kind of made my heart come alive, and it's not really stressful anymore.
Well, and you've always enjoyed sort of playing with little kids. Like you get excited to play with your niece Delilah or your nephew Kason, and you always you interact well with those kids, and you get to do that to a degree at Great Wolf, or you at least get to see kids having a good time.
Right.
And you're a part of providing that.
Right.
Which makes your heart come alive. And it's important. And that's what Bianca is reminding Donnie. It's like what name you use doesn't matter. Because the truth is you love fighting. The truth is you are his son. What harm is there in taking it because it's true? And what's true can't really be taken away.
Right.
And so in movies, and if Britt was here, he could describe this whole storytelling, whatever it is they're about to do here, where it seems like everything's moving in a positive direction. And then something happens. Rocky collapses in the ring and he gets diagnosed with cancer. But because of his history, because he watched his wife die from cancer, because all of his life to that point was in the past and behind him, he didn't want to go through it. He didn't want to fight anymore. He just wanted to give up. And so Donnie finds out. He's like, what? We got to get you into treatment. We got to get you into therapy. We got to go after this. And Rocky's response was pretty devastating.
Everything I got is moved on, and I'm here. But you know what? It's okay. Because I said to myself, if I break, if I'm hurt, whatever, I ain't gonna fix it. Why bother?
And I'm just some bum that's living in your crib, just nothing.
You're a good kid, a good fighter. But you got your whole future ahead of you. Mine? Back there, like all them guys on that wall. In the back, in the past. We're going nowhere. I am to you just an old trainer. That's what brought us together, you know? We're not a real family.
When I pulled the clip, I think I cut it a little short because he's like, we were just fooling ourselves. Like this cancer diagnosis changed how Rocky saw himself and Adonis because they were having fun. They were, as you mentioned, sort of that father-son dynamic that even Rocky had been missing. And in that scene, Adonis's fear comes out. What am I to you? Am I nothing? I'm not worth fighting for?
Right.
And Rocky sort of says, we're not family. I'm just a trainer to you. Because those lies, that wasn't what Adonis thought of him. But that's how Rocky was sort of making himself feel better about a decision to give up. Because you can't get past the identity that we accept. You know, he's like, I'm just a trainer to him. And then Donnie's like, I'm nothing to you. Because you just said that. I'm nothing.
Right. And I think that's also later in the clip, it says, Rocky says, if I could ball up every good moment that has happened in the past couple months since his wife died, and he would trade it just for one more day with his wife. And I feel like him getting the cancer brought back memories of his wife that Adonis kind of made Rocky forget about. Because Rocky felt like Adonis was that home and his close family, and then the cancer kind of killed it all.
It reminded him of who he was before Adonis showed up.
Right.
He's like, I want to check out. If I break down, if I die, I don't care. I just want to I'm done. Britt and I did a series on the first 4 Rocky movies. And while you think, wow, that seems kind of monotonous, there was different nuances in each one. But Rocky never gave up. As he mentioned in that clip, that talking about that man in the mirror, it's like, that is your biggest enemy. That's your biggest opponent. And it's not about fighting. It's not about beating the man across from you. It's about beating the man inside you. And in this clip we just listened to, Rocky lost, right? He gave in to that fear. He gave in to that desire to give up. Because what made him different as a fighter was he kept getting up. He kept coming back. He never stopped. He never quit. In his very first one, he said, I just want to go the distance with Apollo.
Right.
And when we're talking about identity, one, that's not who Rocky was, but it's sort of who he is becoming by choice. But the other interesting thing, as soon as Adonis runs off, he sits down and realizes he has done something, said something stupid. Adonis goes off and in his emotional state reacts when somebody calls him Baby Creed, and he punches the headliner of Bianca's show because Bianca's a musician. So he messes up her gig. So now he's alienated from her. He ends up in jail for assaulting this musician. And Rocky, because, by the way, fathers and father figures will make mistakes. We'll say things that are hurtful because we're hurt. We will do things that are hurtful because we don't know any better. But Rocky does what I think all good fathers do. And he comes to him and he finds him in jail. He apologizes for the things that he said. But then he speaks more truth. And he's like, because Adonis is just like, get out, get away from me. And Michael B. Jordan does such a fantastic job in this scene of showing the pain that Adonis would be feeling in this moment.
Now you need me. Till I tell you what's on my mind. You hate me, that's what it is. Or maybe you're mad with somebody who ain't here, Donnie, who can't defend himself. You know? I understand what you're going through, young man. I swear I've been there. And I know what it's like to feel abandoned and be mad at everything. And you're a better person than that. Forgive him, because there's nothing you can do about it. And it's taking a toll on you. You're still caught in the shadow. Gotta move, Donnie.
Because who Donnie is really fighting is his idea of his father. I love that. Get out of the shadow, because that's what he is when he's fighting kind of in the mirror. It's called shadow boxing. And he's fighting himself. But he's got his dad in the mirror, and his dad's not somebody that he can actually ever win because he's gone. And the only answer he has is to forgive him. And that's the only answer a lot of us have when things like that happen. So I told Brendan I would tell this story because we talk about how much he loves sports and football and all this. And being in healthcare, having some sort of knowledge, I was very nervous about letting them play football. Because I was like, I want to protect your brains. I'm a little worried. Anybody who plays football gets hurt. Like, that's what I saw. And it was actually on a walk with your brother. One day we were out walking after we dropped you off at school and before he had to go to school. And we were walking and he asked me, he's like, Dad, why don't you let us play football? And I'm trying to give, the scientific reasons, but it's basically because I'm afraid. And God spoke to me in those moments, just kind of this little nudge. Like, don't you trust me with your kids? And again, if you don't want your kids to do that, and there is a certain level of fear and risk and all this stuff. But I wanted the story of trusting God with my children, of not hiding behind my fear. And so, Brendan, you didn't play football until your junior year.
Right.
You had a coach, and what was it? At the end of the first year, he said, oh man, if I'd only had you for a couple of years or even a year, you'd be starting this year.
Right.
And then that coach left. His high school hired a new coach. COVID came, but you got a senior year.
Right.
You played in every game. You started a few, made plays. And then at the end, you went in to say goodbye to your coaches. And I think didn't they say something to you?
Yeah, they said, we wish you played more. And that was, this year, it felt more than just football because of COVID and not so many people playing on the team. There was limited numbers. And so saying goodbye to the coaches and them saying that was just tough.
And so I had to ask you to forgive me, because what would have happened if I had let you play those first 2 years of high school? Maybe you would have gotten offered a scholarship. Maybe you would have started every game. Maybe, I don't know what would have been different. And neither do you. But to have coaches saying, I wish I had you for more time. You could have been a starter if you had been here a year sooner. The coaches being surprised you'd only been playing for 2 years. Like what could have been possible if you had played for all of high school or even before that?
Right.
And so I said, Brendan, I need you to forgive me. And you, of course, you're like, yeah, it's fine. Like, no, listen, because even if you think it's fine, there's a part of you that might be frustrated, that might blame me for you not being as successful on the football field as you would have liked to have been.
I also think that is also what made me. Because if I played all 4 years and I did get a scholarship, I think that would have changed a lot of perspective of people, of what they had on me. What kind of happened to Adonis, where people found out he was the son of Creed, and now everybody's like, oh, he's a Creed, he's a fighter, he's going to be good, this and that. And if I did get that scholarship, I feel like I would be in a completely different place.
It's a different pressure, right?
Right.
What I'm saying is there's a lot of forgiveness. Forgiveness. I've said this a few times, but forgiveness is like breathing. We all must, especially in your closest relationships, your family, your intimate friends, you always need to be extending forgiveness for things that people might say or do unintentionally and intentionally. But you've also got to be accepting forgiveness for the things that I constantly do that screw things up. Like in this case, Rocky, when he reacted to Adonis and in that hurtful way, and he's immediately like, "What have I done? You old fool," or whatever he said there.
Right.
But he pursued him and said, "Forgive me for doing that." And then to call out, "Forgive him." And there's a lot of people that we need to forgive these days. People get up in arms, and there's a lot of hate going on in the world. And the best way to do it is to forgive. And that could be politicians who disagree with you. That could be people on Facebook. That could be your kids who said something hurtful or did something hurtful that made you feel like less of a mom or less of a dad. It may be that phone call with the news that you wished you never would have heard. You're like, I need to forgive them because I love this person. And because we're called to not just love our friends and our neighbors, but also our enemies and pray for them. It's really hard to pray for someone and still be angry at them unless you're praying for them to die. But I think there's some issues theologically with that.
Yeah.
So what I really enjoyed about this movie is the next day, Donnie gets out of jail. He goes to see Bianca. He apologizes. And she's like, yeah, you're sorry. You said you apologize. What was it? She said something like, you apologize when you spill a glass of tea. You don't just say you're sorry when you punch the headliner of the show that I've been working really hard to get to. Like that was a big deal. What he did was costly to Bianca, more costly to her than it was to him. And so she shuts him out because our tendency in those moments where we're feeling vulnerable and insecure is to reach for validation and security from women. We talked in another one, women in work tend to be men's kind of go-to crutches for, I feel scared, vulnerable, insecure. I need either woman or work to pick me back up. But even shutting him out when he tells Bianca that Rocky's got cancer, but he's not going to get treatment, she's like, well, you need to make sure that he gets it. And in these movies, these stories, and Britt will talk about this a lot, the man, in this case, has to become who he is before he gets the girl. And Bianca will show up at the big fight at the end. But that's when he's become himself. That's when he's become Adonis. And he's stepping into his identity. Because when we're looking for our identity from the women, from work, then what we're actually doing is taking. Tell me who I am. Make me feel better about myself. I feel sad and lonely. Make me feel better, is what we're saying in that situation. And instead, what Adonis is becoming is a guy who can say, I'm glad you're here, who can own his part of what happened, who's growing, and he's offering his strength and not taking sort of what he feels like he needs. So we go, as all Rocky movies go, we get to the big fight. And as he goes into the fight, into the locker room, there's a box waiting for him. And in the box is a card from Ma, from Marianne, from his mother. Remember, she hasn't talked to him. I'm not sure they talked on the phone or anything. But in the box are the Stars and Stripes boxing trunks. And on the front, it said Creed. And on the back, it said Johnson. Because it's always both and. Like saying yes to one didn't mean saying no to the other. He's both Creed and Johnson. But the note was what I really thought was powerful. And what she said was, build your own legacy. Every school year, as you know, Brendan.
Yeah.
Every school year I write, for the last several years, I've written you a letter and I ask God for advanced words for your school year. And would write one for you and Andrew and Lainey. This year, the word that I've been getting for you has been legacy. Because in a lot of ways, I think of our children as our legacy. Yeah, I love what in Hamilton, the line is, a legacy is planting seeds in a garden that you never get to see. And our legacy is passed on much more in our kids than anything else we do, anything in work or just about anything. Our kids are a much stronger statement of our legacy. But as I've been thinking about this, and then this line of build your own legacy, I'm realizing for you, Brendan, that as you go off to college, this is when you start to build your legacy. This is when you become, as you said, you find yourself, you become the man that God intended when he created you. And it is a discovery because it's like you're trying different things. You're like, hey, maybe this is, we talked about that even for going to football games. Because, you know, some guys show up with shorts and painted chests. Some guys show up in, you know, bow ties and fancy clothes and all kinds of stuff. So even figuring out what group you want to be in, what you enjoy the most, who you enjoy being around the most, like that's the start of your legacy. So this is the beginning. This is laying the foundation for your life to come. And this is your opportunity to build your legacy. Sorry, I don't have any stars and stripes trunks for you.
I do.
I thought you did, don't you? So we're going to cut to a clip in the middle of the fight where Adonis is getting his butt kicked. He's got one eye is swollen shut, can't see out of it. Rocky is saying, basically, I don't want you to see you die like I saw your dad die. And Adonis responds again with a line, and this is really probably my favorite scene of the movie, with a line that just reveals his deepest ache.
I should have stopped this one with your father. I'm stopping this one now.
Don't, okay, let me finish. I gotta prove it.
Prove what?
I'm not a mistake.
Look at me. I never got a chance to thank Apollo for helping me out after Mickey died. But it's nothing compared to what you've done. You taught me how to fight again, and I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna fight this thing. But if I fight, I want you to fight too. I want you to go across this ring and knock that son of a bitch down. Can you do it? Say it.
You're gonna knock that son of a bitch down.
I know you are. You know why? Because you're a Creed, and I love you, kid.
It's the moment in the movie where Adonis finds himself, where he's like, yes, I'm building my own legacy, but I'm also Apollo's son, and I belong here. And in that final round, we see the real Adonis come out, and I think that's a really good moment.
Because his biggest fear is that he's a mistake, right? I mean, even going back, he is the son born out of an affair that when you see it come to news, they're like, does this tarnish Apollo's legacy? Yeah, because they kept it quiet. They didn't tell anybody. He was Johnson. He was not really accepted as a full member of the Creed family. And yeah, some of that was his decision of making his own way. He wanted to make his own name, as every young man wants to do. They want to build their own kingdom. They want to make their way. They want to blaze their own trail, whatever cliche or acronym you want to use. And in that moment, he's like, I got to prove that I'm not a mistake. I got to prove, like you said, that I belong here. You know, it's been 11 rounds. He stood toe to toe with the champ who thought that he was going to knock him out in 2. He got up when everybody thought he was done. And yet it's finishing the fight. And in all of these movies and all the Rocky movies Britt and I talked about, like the first one, Rocky lost the first one, but won Adrian's heart and Adrian's love. Even though you might lose the fight, what you've gained is so much more important. Because, by the way, Adonis is not going to win the fight. But like you mentioned, what just happened there is Rocky bestowed the identity. And he did it with affirmation and with love. You are a Creed. You belong here. You've made me fight. I owed Apollo thanks, but you've done even more for me than your dad did. of bringing me and my heart back to life. And then he says, you're a Creed and I love you. And no more of that. We're not a family. I'm just an old trainer. He's like, I'm all in. He gave him his heart. He gave him his affirmation. He gave him his identity. And he could go out and knock that son of a bitch down, right?
Right.
Throughout the fight, he's been fighting a battle worthy of his father, worthy of the effort, where he's shown heart. But at the end of the fight, the announcers start saying he's, doing this like Creed. His fear was he would be a fake Creed. But what actually happens, hope you enjoyed it. I hope you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Rocky Balboa, going upstairs like he's Apollo Creed.
Goes another 30 seconds, we may have a new champion.
An unforgettable fight on an unforgettable night. He's no longer just the namesake of Apollo Creed. He's the living embodiment.
Adonis, I know you never met your father, but if he was here tonight, what would you want to say to him?
I just tell him that I love him. And I know he ain't leave me on purpose. And I'm proud to be a Creed.
Because a lot of times I think we struggle to accept who we are, right? In this case, he's proud to be a Creed. Where throughout the rest of the movie, he's bristled when somebody calls him a Creed. That line that he said, it's not like he ran away. It's not like he shirked his responsibility as a father. He didn't ask to miss my life. And that's a sign that he has forgiven his father for the wounds that he had. And you might think, well, what wound? He died. Well, there's a wounding because your dad's not there.
Right.
And in that moment, you see both forgiveness and acceptance. Of forgiveness for his dad allows him to become who he's supposed to be. And that's why this is one of my favorite movies.
Me as well.
So, Brendan, if you could take away one thing from this movie, or the number one reason to see this movie, or how this movie has changed how you look at your own life.
I think it's more of I can relate to Adonis because my whole life I've tried to live up to everybody's expectations, trying to be Apollo Creed, basically. And in the movie, it's more of I'm trying to find myself from Adonis. And I think that's a really good story and a really good lesson to learn, that you don't really have to live up to everybody's expectations, but you find yourself. And that's kind of how Adonis felt in the movie. He found himself and he accepted who he was.
Well, Brendan, thanks for coming down to the office to record live in the new studio room.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Good luck in college and beyond. So there you have it. It's been Paul McDonald and Brendan McDonald talking about Creed, one of their favorite movies. I'd say probably top five movie for me.
My favorite by far.
So high praise. For resources, we connect you with books or quotes or stuff that we might have mentioned, because I don't always get the names of the quotes right. So I look up the quotes to make sure I attribute it to the right people. So we also have questions if you wanted to sort of process the stuff yourself and ask yourself and participate and maybe even talk about it with your own band of brothers or your own kids or whatever it is. If you'd like to partner with us, we've also got a Patreon page. It's patreon.com/Men at the Movies. You can get access to different perks like ebooks that we've got coming out. We're going to have short videos, and we don't know yet, but we've got some of that stuff. You can live stream. We do a once a month live stream where you can actually see the behind the scenes and all the unedited content before we get it all cleaned up. And you might even get an invitation to come on the show and talk about your favorite movie. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation about Creed, and I hope that you join us next week here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?